Okay, go ahead. Hello, everybody. This is Cynthia Bettner from Silvio Conti National Fish and Wildlife Refuge. Today we're going to be talking about water chestnut, which is an invasive plant that the refuge has been working in partnership with lots of partners and lots of volunteers and youth crew members to try to bring the species under control in the Connecticut River watershed. We've learned that, of course, the federal budget cuts have been knocking a lot of programs down in size, and unfortunately that's true with our water chestnut program as well. So I wanted to reach out to partners and others to just let you know what's going on in case there are any interested parties to help out. So I want to give you a sense of what we're doing in the watershed on water chestnut. And I'm learning the technology here, so bear with me. So as a lot of you probably already know, the Conti Refuge is a watershed-wide refuge, the whole Connecticut River watershed, spanning through a large portion of Vermont, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts, and Connecticut, all the way down to Long Island Sound. One of our missions is to conserve, protect, and enhance the abundance and diversity of native species of the watershed. And of course, invasive species are a threat to that diversity. Water chestnut is one of those. And this species is not it's not entrenched in the New England states, so we have a chance of keeping that one in check if we're vigilant. This is what the plant looks like. This is what you see floating on top of the water, and it has many more flowers than this one single white flower that's on this particular individual. As it matures, those white flowers turn to seeds. This is the underside of the rosette. And the seeds are spiny. The ones on the right are lightweight and floating. They are no longer viable. They've already produced their plant. The new ones that are on the left-hand plant are maturing, and those will drop to the bottom, and they will produce new plants in one of the next 12 years. So those seeds are viable for 12 years, but they are annual, so it'll only grow once and then die. One seed will produce about half of the mass that you see in this photograph. So this is probably what was created from 2, maybe 3 nutlets. I'm going to back up a little bit just to show you identifying features. You'll notice that the plant is all stemming from a central point here, and all these leaves radiate out from this central stem. They have floating air-filled bladders that help them float, and the leaves are diamond-shaped that have a scalloped edge. So they're really quite easy to identify. This is attached, this floating rosette is attached to a long stem that's anchored in the water by that seed that I showed you. And there are several rosettes all attached to the same stem. It's easy to overlook, though, if there's just one single plant. You could pass one by pretty easily. And if that happens, here's just an idea of what would happen over time should one of those rosettes be missed. Each rosette produces probably at least 10 nutlets, and each of those produces a new plant with up to 3, 4, maybe 5 rosettes. So if we take a conservative estimate and say that those 10 nutlets produce 10 new plants, each with 3 rosettes. Then we'll have 30 new rosettes the following year. That's if they all grow in that particular year, not within the next 12 years. Then those 30 rosettes, 10 nutlets, 300 plants, each with 3 rosettes, 900 rosettes, and then on it goes until you're really getting into pretty big numbers. And I just thought I'd try, for the fun of it, a graphic that would show what we're looking at. So here's the one rosette in 1 year, and then what will happen in the next year, or maybe some of those will grow the next year and some will wait till the following year, some will wait till the year after that. And then I couldn't even fit all of the rosettes for the following year onto one page. So it's more like 4.5 times what you see here that would be growing out of just those 30 rosettes from that one single rosette the first year. So it goes to show how quickly this plant can really take over a water body. And that's what happened here in Log Pond Cove in Holyoke, Massachusetts. This infestation was brought to our attention back in 1997, and it looked like a field, not a water body at all. We tried naively to get people in there to hand pull, and it was just useless. There was just so much there. So we pulled together lots of partners, some funding, and we were able to get a machine harvester in the first year at great expense, actually. It cost $86,000 to mechanically harvest the water chestnut from Log Pond Cove, and it needed a lot of other equipment too, like this crane that loaded the plants up into a dump truck, and then those plants were then transported to above the floodplain into a safer place. Unfortunately, that particular site is still ongoing control. We've had to switch from mechanical harvesting to herbicide because mechanical harvesting wasn't getting edges that were too shallow. So now it's being sprayed, and even still, we haven't had full coverage ever since we started. So things have diminished. It's looking a lot better, but still not under control. Thankfully, Holyoke Gas and Electric has been a great partner and put a lot of company funds into controlling this. We've gotten grants from a number of sources, but we've kind of run out of options on funding, and so it's Holyoke Gas and Electric that's towing the line right now to keep this going. So the idea is to try to prevent these kinds of infestations from happening and trying to get at the newer infestations as soon as possible. This is some folks from our Youth Conservation Corps. We've had such a corps for the last several years, led by Nate Bush there in uniform, and he's done a great job, and his predecessors before him, Aaron Sibold and Brett Delinas, and they've gone to every pond and cove that has been reported to have water chestnut in Massachusetts and pulled everything they could find. So it's really been quite the endeavor. This is on the bank of the Chicopee River, where we took out loads and loads, 10 tons in 2007. Actually, I was going to come back and fill in how much we took out in 2013, but I hadn't found that information yet. But I know it didn't take long at all to do it. I think it was just down to several hundred pounds at this point last year. So quite a difference, showing what a success can be had by doing this hand pulling. But it's taken a lot of people. That 10 tons took days and days with lots of volunteers to help. And I think that might have even been before we had a large youth conservation corps. The that photo, that's Laurel Carpenter, who now works at the Great Falls Discovery Center. She was another person who managed the volunteers and the youth to do this work several years ago. Here's another story just showing a particular site through time. You can see that it took 5 days the very first year, back in 2000, 5 days of mechanical harvesting, 684 hours of people power, and we took out 100,000 pounds. Now this particular site was overseen by the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, so the Connecticut DEEP, and they called upon us and many others to come help. The next year it only took 2 days, 125 hours, and it was actually down so far to 8,500 pounds. And as you can see through time, the numbers have dropped mostly, but gone up a little bit and down a little bit. Last year there was only 40 pounds taken out. Year before that, 920. So you can see it does fluctuate because there's still those 12 years worth of seeds, and if we might have missed a few here and there, then those seeds are then sprouting. But overall, we're never seeing again the amount that we started out with. You'll see the amount of time put into it varies a lot, and it doesn't necessarily coincide with the amount taken out, and that's because when we have people, we just take them when we spend time trying to check every little nook and cranny to find what might be there. So this is one of the most successful sites, the most dramatic anyway. As I mentioned, we're really looking to have more people involved in this effort. With the federal budget cuts, we're not able to keep up with those 25 sites the way we have in the past. We do have a Youth Conservation Corps, but we don't have a Nate or an Aaron or a Laurel to be helping lead that corps. So we've had to prioritize our sites to those with the highest ecological quality based on state GIS layers, and we're not quite sure where it's all going to pan out this year. Fortunately, we do have groups that have adopted a few sites, and that's helped tremendously. The Connecticut River Watershed Council and the First Light Company have been working on Barton's Cove, and they've had, that's in Gill, Massachusetts, they have an event planned for July 19th, I believe, and another one in the evening. Andy, what's the date on the evening one?
First week in August.
Okay. So feel free to contact me to find out more about those dates. There's a new group called the Friends of Lake Warner that are planning an event on July 26th for Lake Warner, also known as North Hadley Pond. And those are two of our biggest sites. So we're really fortunate to have had those folks step forward. But if you wanted to help, what you can do is this year, because we're already in the middle of the year, it's kind of hard to people to step forward and actually adopt a water body at this point. But you could do follow-up work where our refuge has already pulled so that we don't necessarily have to go back to those sites. So that's something that an individual, or better yet, an organized group could do. You could sign up to learn about organized events that are already planned, like the ones I just mentioned. Another group that's been looking after one of the ponds over the last few years is just a group of volunteers that have taken on Lake Bray on Mount Tom. And they've been a tremendous help. I'll show you one of the pictures from that event that just happened yesterday, July 12th. So that's what people could do this year, 2014. But next year, we're hoping that people might step forward in advance, maybe during the winter or the spring before the water chestnut season is upon us, to express interest in adopting a pond or cove known to have water chestnut. And an organized group would be the best thing, as opposed to just an individual, just so that a group could take responsibility through time, even if the people within that group changes. And again, people can just sign up to learn about and to help with organized events done by other groups. And then any individual, any time, June through October, water chestnut season, when they're out canoeing or kayaking, can just be on the lookout for water chestnut and report whether they saw it or not. It's always helpful to know if a water body doesn't have water chestnut. That's one that we can check off of our list as not needing to worry about for the time being. And when you're out kayaking or canoeing, you might not know which ponds have been known to have water chestnut. So just getting back with me about that and letting me know what you found would be really helpful. So the time I say is June through October, but actually the seeds are dropping starting, could be as early as mid-August, depending on how hot a summer is. But until it freezes, those plants are still visible, even if the seeds have dropped. So it's still very helpful to know what's out there. Here's a map that shows the range of water chestnut sites in Massachusetts. You can see it ranges all the way from Gill in the northern realm, Ashfield to the west, and down to Longmeadow in the south. And in Connecticut, it's Connecticut DEP, mostly the Fisheries Division, that's been working on a lot of these sites. And the Conti Refuge has taken responsibility for a few of them. So we're looking for people to adopt some of these sites as well. Here are the towns known to have water chestnut in Massachusetts. And associated with that are some of the names of the ponds and coves. This is just a few of the names. I couldn't fit all 25 of them onto one slide here, but this is the major ones. Here are some of the Connecticut towns with water chestnut. Because we don't work in Connecticut as much as Massachusetts, these are just some of them that I'm aware of. So for those who might be interested in this but really don't know much about it, I just thought I'd share with you how we do this, and this could be helpful to get a sense of what it's like. So what we do is we find the plants, we pull them, and I'll tell you a little bit more about how we pull them. We put them into 5-gallon buckets. This is our pre-draining system. So we fill the bucket, and then we drain the water out, and then we dump it into a contractor bag. That makes it really easy to haul around rather than just arm loads full of plants, and we found that to work well for us. Other groups that do this, they just arm load it into their canoes, and they might have dump trucks on the other end that they can load into, but for us, we're trying to haul bags either up and outside of the floodplain or back onto our truck to take back to some refuge land where we have a pile. And then how we pull, very gently. The idea is to try to get as much of that plant out as possible. We use the spaghetti technique, we call it, which is we just wind the plant around and around our hand, just very slowly, trying to ease as much of that plant out of the muck and from being tangled up with other plants as possible. You can see the picture on the right. That plant, you might not be able to tell, but the plant goes all the way down to behind the bucket here. So it's really got a long stem, and the the leaves on the stem are much more feathery. I didn't really have a photograph to show you. Get a sense of one of the leaves over here and how feathery it is. So the idea is to try to get as much of that plant out as possible. And once in a while, you'll even get the seed attached still to a plant. Those are very tenuously attached, so they pop off after the plant is grown, but sometimes they stay on, and that's always a great feeling to get that seed out too, because you know that plant's not going to regrow. If a rosette becomes detached from the rest of the stem and floats away, as long as it's been flowering, it has enough reserves to produce seeds. So you want to make sure you don't lose any of those in your travels. And we were finding last year, Nate took some fragments and put them in a bucket, and it looks to us like these plants are growing new roots as well, which we'd never heard of before. What we don't know yet is whether just a fragment like a stem that doesn't have any rosette at all can actually still produce a new rosette. I doubt it, but that's something that we've yet to explore, and I haven't seen anything about that in the literature. Timing, those rosettes surface in late June. They might be tiny, but that's when they start to surface. The stems are usually strong enough by mid-July to start pulling, and we usually pull through mid-August. At that point, the plants are starting to produce seeds, and sometimes they're mature enough that the seeds start dropping. So we usually stop about mid-August. That's when we've run out of Youth Conservation Corps help and time, but as long as there are any seeds still left on those rosettes, it can be worth pulling the plant, because as you saw, even one seed falling in can really go gangbusters in the future. So it usually flowers in July, and I already mentioned when the seeds mature. So we usually only get out there once. We have so many sites to cover that we get out there once, sometime in July or early August. But for those groups who are able to go out twice, they're having much more success at bringing their infestations down more quickly than us. I talked to a man in eastern Massachusetts who goes out in June when things are first surfacing, and he just plucks off all of the rosettes he can find, and that buys him some time. The stems grow stronger, and then he goes out again in July and again in August and pulls all the plants he can find, and he's able to keep up with them that way. Arcadia Wildlife Sanctuary, they pull twice a year, and last year they were down to only 25 pounds after having tons and tons taken out over the years. So ideally, doing twice or even 3 times would be preferable. And we're hoping that once in July through mid-August is sufficient, because that has been all we've been able to do so far. Sometimes we're able to get back when we know a lot was breaking. We make a point of going back at the time. If you're trying to pull once these seeds are already established on the plants, and mature seeds can be only, I think it's like 1/2 to 5/8 of an inch in diameter. So these bigger ones that you see on this are more like, they could be an inch in diameter. The smaller ones you see, probably less than that 1/2 inch that I mentioned. So even a little bit bigger than that, and they're viable. So they become detached very easily once they're mature. A good thing to do is to just flip them over if you're still trying to pull at that point. Flip them over and just try to gently raise them up out of the water. At this point in time, if we're out there that late, we just sever the stem. We don't think that there's still enough time for a new rosette and a full seeding to occur. So we just gently break that stem and put the rosette into our bags when we have mature seeds like this. Disposal should take place well away from water. We wouldn't want any of those seeds to tumble back in where they could take root the following year. I've already mentioned that extra care should be taken with plants that have new nutlets. And these plants actually decompose really quickly. They take up a lot of space when you first pull them, but they're mostly water and air, and so they really go down to almost nothing, except for the nutlets. Those are so hard and durable that they last for quite some time. But we did donate a lot of plants before we had our own refuge land to create a dump pile, and the farmer that we took them to actually said they were really helpful for composting. We always try to make a point to our youth to stay safe by staying well balanced in the canoe. Sometimes you can just get so focused on trying to reach out for that plant that's just out of reach, and if the person behind you is doing the same thing in the same canoe, you could topple over. Another thing to be aware of is try to use the hand that's on the side of the canoe. The person on the left looks like he's well balanced, so I doubt if he's having any trouble, but he should really be pulling with his left hand there instead of his right hand, like the person behind him is doing. This shows the different sizes of rosettes that can all be occurring at the same time. These photos were just taken late last week, last Friday actually, on July 11th. There was this one that was very, very tiny, and some that were even smaller than that. And the day before that, the crew was seeing some that were still submerged, hadn't even reached the surface yet. And then some of these, like this one down here on the lower left, might be 10 inches in diameter at this point. They'll get bigger and bigger until they're saucer-sized. Big saucers, in fact, or dinner plate size, I guess I should say. So they do get pretty huge. So the later you wait, the bigger and more volume of stuff you have to haul around. That particular photo that I just showed you was actually in a place that was kind of hiding. We almost missed it. But back hiding behind this log was this small population. And so we tried to figure out exactly how we were going to get at that and still be safe. And so the YCC crew leader here, Steph, on the left, she decided she was going to take it on. The person behind her held onto that log. I was holding on to their canoe, so we were trying to stabilize their canoe as much as possible. She tried to keep 3 limbs on a surface at all times. You can see that those surfaces were many different areas, but she was able to reach over and grab the plant. There was still more to go after that, so she allowed one of the Youth Conservation Corps members, Henry, to lean over 2 stabilized canoes and over the log and reach out with his canoe, the hook end of his canoe paddle, and reach out and grab the plant. So you can be pretty creative, but the idea is to stay as safe as you can. We found that another good reaching tool besides the end of a canoe paddle is a potato rake, the kind that is just like a claw at the end. Looks kind of like a cultivator, but with a long handle. So those work really well for grabbing the larger plants. This is Dave Hirschef just yesterday. He was out at Lake Bray, and he took on a different tactic. He had waders on and waded in. You can see that he had walking poles to keep himself balanced, which is a really good idea. But one thing to keep in mind is some of the places where water chestnut occurs are really, really mucky, and you can sink really deep and almost get swallowed up. So be really careful about that. Know your pond well before you venture out in a case like this. Another thing to keep in mind as far as health and safety goes is just the water quality. If you know in advance how to check into what might be running into that water, it's a good idea to try to find that out. And if you can't find it out, to just try to protect yourself. Know that there's farm runoff going in that could include herbicides and pesticides. A lot of nutrients go in, and that's what makes all these invasive and other aquatic plants grow. There could be Giardia, there could be E. coli, there could be cyanobacteria, which is something that I've just been learning about recently. I never really knew about blue-green algae and the health impacts that can occur from exposure to that. And I would highly recommend people to do a Google search on identifying cyanobacteria, know what the signs are, and try to protect yourselves from contact with that and the other things like E. coli and Giardia. And I'll show you what we've done to try to protect ourselves on our crew. You probably saw in all those photos the long elbow-length gloves. Those are actually not easy to come by, so I put the link to the source that we use for ours. Gemplers carries them. We've been just keeping all of our beverages in one big cooler and stopping for breaks. And we have some antibacterial wipes that the leader passes around. So before we can even get to our water bottles, we have to clean ourselves off. Having a water bottle with a good amount of water at your lunch site is a good idea. Soap and water. Some antibacterial lotion is a good idea. And keeping your water bottle out of that sloshing, icky, messy water that might be in the bottom of your canoe or kayak is important. So just by learning about all these potential health hazards, it's made me, just even when I'm out kayaking or canoeing, more aware of trying to keep my food and my water clean and myself clean so I'm not contaminating my water bottle before I drink out of it. I'm wearing the fanny pack when I go out and just keep my water bottle up and safe, and then clean my hands with the antibacterial wipes before I drink. Another option would be just one of these lightweight backpacks that you could put your water bottle into. So that's what we're recommending to our crew. And then we're also recommending waterproof footwear so that, because we're out all day long, we can get pretty water soaked and wrinkly toed. So a lot of the crew I see are getting waterproof footwear, which I think is a really good idea for this project. And to try to stay dry in the kayak, I know we've had people just filling bags in the past, bags that are in the same place where you're sitting, and those bags can leak out and you can just end up sitting in water for a day, and that's probably really not all that healthy. So we checked in to find out what other groups are doing that use kayaks instead of canoes, and some of them attach laundry baskets to the hull of their kayak with bungee cords, and they just fill those up with the water chestnut and then find somebody in a canoe that can offload that into their bags. So that would be what I would recommend for kayakers. Another thing that we do to try to prevent moving invasive species from one body to another, one water body to another, is the whole idea of cleaning, draining, and drying the canoe or kayak between one pond and another. There's so many things that can get stuck to your vessel, and to try to get rid of all that before you move on is really a good idea. What we do is we have a hot water pressure washer back at our refuge property at our field station. They're expensive. I don't expect that you'd be able to do that. So another good thing to read up on is go to this website, the Northern Forest Canoe Trail, and just do a Google search for Northern Forest Canoe Trail and aquatic invasives, and they have this great video that you can watch on procedure for cleaning your canoe or kayak before you head on to another water body. And it's a real good how-to. They show you how to do it. They're not just telling you. So I would highly recommend that. If you'd like to report water chestnut, you can email me always and let me know. You can also send the information into an online reporting system called EdMap. There's training to tell you how to go about doing that. And there's also a phone app called Outsmart Invasives. It doesn't have water chestnut on it, but it does have other, and you can punch water chestnut into that. And the neat thing about that is that it just automatically reports in the location, the latitude, longitude, and you can take a photograph so that it can be verified, and it just automatically goes into the database, then will be verified by people who are expert with their botanical skills, and you've reported it that way. So that would be another way to do that. That is used in Massachusetts and Connecticut and New Hampshire. Vermont has a different system, but you can report it through this into Vermont as well. Another thing that I'd like to encourage people to do is to learn about other new invaders. Not only water chestnut is a new invader to the watershed, but many others as well. And we've been trying, the refuge and its partners have been trying to educate people about some of those other species that really have the potential to do harm. This is Ted Elliman in the center of the picture. He's a botanist with New England Wildflower Society, and he led a few of our workshops in the last couple of years. We don't have any scheduled yet for this year, but we are talking about maybe even trying to do one in August. So please do let me know if you're interested in attending such a workshop. So for any more information about what I've talked about today, please do give me a call or email. I'd love to talk to you about it. Anything that you might want to do to get involved in this initiative. So with that, I'll turn it over to questions. Oh, and as you're thinking about your questions, I just wanted to show this list too of a lot of the partners who've been involved in this project through the years, with a special emphasis being on the very last one, many, many, many dedicated volunteers. So what questions do you have, if any? Okay, I'm not hearing any questions, so I want to thank you for...
Cynthia, I have a question.
Sure.
This is Dave Herships. I was just curious. Yesterday when I was picking them, I saw these very young plants, and I don't know whether they were days or weeks old, but I was just curious, have you tracked that at all, about the emergence? Because as you pointed out, yesterday was there really wasn't a lot of And that one area which we go into with waders because you can't get in there with a canoe or a kayak because of downed trees. In past years, there's been 2 or 3 times as many plants. And I was just curious about, and now we're going to watch that pretty carefully because we can see that place from the overlook at Mount Tom State Park going forward. I was just curious, have you tracked that at all in terms of when these things grow and the pattern of growth and emergence?
You know, it
plant?
does vary from year to year. We had such a cool spring that I'm not surprised that things might not be quite as far along this year as it might have been last year, which was really hot. So I think the water temperature has a lot to do with it, and that's about all I can say. It really, in some cases, seems to be unpredictable what we're going to find. You know, we can work at a place and from year to year see the population go down, 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 down and think, oh boy, next year there's not going to be anything. We go back and there's a little resurgence, not necessarily a huge one, but one that we just weren't expecting. And I think it has to do with those seeds being viable for so long and not really knowing what it is that triggers them. So yeah, this year we are seeing that things aren't quite as far along as they have been in the past. A couple of years when we had really high water levels, especially in the river, our sites that were in coves in the river took the longest time for those rosettes to reach the surface just because they had to keep working up to reach that surface. And the stems were very weak and were breaking, and it made it difficult. And we weren't finding much of anything in some of our sites those years. So I wish I could answer your question with a lot more certainty, but that's about all I can say.
Well, that's reasonable enough. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, well, thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. And again, feel free to contact me with any questions that you might think of in the meantime. And for those of you who might be watching this as a recording, don't hesitate to call with any questions you might have. So thanks a lot, all. Take care. Florence, you still there?